It's a great pleasure to welcome to the show today a man who has written a follow-up to his very successful book called Eat Right for Your Type. And this is the follow-up, Eat Right for Your Type, the Individualized Blood Type Diet Solution. We're joined today by Dr. Peter J. D'Adamo, and he joined us by telephone. And, Doctor, good to talk with you. How are you?
Hey, Doug. Thank you for having me.
Hey, good to have a chance to chat with you for a couple of minutes. Had an opportunity to go through the book. First of all, congratulations on it. I didn't realize it was that long ago that it had come out. I remember back in '97 when it did. I guess it probably exceeded even your expectations, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you know, the 2 decades since I wrote the book, I mean, everything has changed. I've become a professor, and I teach medical students and all sorts of things. So it was like, at a certain point, it was kind of interesting to kind of come back and revisit it, but it really was done because there was just so much new information that had occurred in those 20 years that really needed to be incorporated back into the book. So it was like coming back and dealing with something, you know, an old friend or an old photograph of you wearing clothes 20 years ago. Kind of like, well, you know, I'm a little uncomfortable here with this, but I guess it's okay.
When you first started to write it in the mid-'90s, did you find there was some resistance among the medical community, or was it pretty well embraced at the time?
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of resistance as much as it's just, you know, I mean, generally diet books arouse mostly apathy because, you know, they're considered mass market things that, you know, no reputable scientist would take seriously. And I think that's pretty much my attitude as well. I mean, there's serious science and then there's mass market work.
Right.
There's a difference between this book and some of the others is that this was a book that had a real significant scientific underpinning. And the advantage of it was, and I've often noticed this in many of the things that I've done in life, is that actually when you have enough information on some things that you've got a very truthful picture of it, it often boils down to simple common sense. And that ultimately the more you know about something, the less mystical it appears, and the more it just turns out to be a piece of common sense. And that really was what made this book so successful. It had, you know, there's enough depth to the science to keep anyone entertained, but it still boils down to commonsensical type things. I mean, you know, eat this, don't eat that. Try to get this thing done, don't do that too much.
Right.
So the reality is it's really just an engineering application of a lot of physiology and a lot of understanding of the path. There's differences in diseases between the blood types. There's differences in physiology. And most people don't realize that actually your blood type plays out much more significantly in your digestive tract than it does in your blood. Because we call it a blood type because we use it to determine transfusions, but it's not just found in your blood. It's actually more numerous in your digestive tract. The thing that makes me an A and my wife an O is a chemical that lines our entire digestive tract and influences how much of certain things like enzymes we make or how much acids in our stomach or what bacteria grow in us. So why not engineer an approach that uses food to do things of a more beneficial nature that can take advantage of this information?
Yeah. You normally, like you said, there's a glut of diet books, usually this time of year, and we don't bring them on unless they have some kind of scientific basis. That's why we have you on today, Doctor. But it is based on a science of blood type, and I didn't realize how drastically different. Just kind of reading in the back of the book, you have different tables, different type of diets for different type of blood types that can really make a difference. That's interesting.
And they're all, you know, if you look at the suggested diets, they're all fundamentally healthy. They're all fundamentally books. Someone wrote an entire diet book saying that everybody should eat this way. So there's 4 variations of good, sound, nutritionally rational diets that basically we're just trying to make the determination, okay, what one is better suited for you? Okay? Are you better suited to a more of a Mediterranean diet, a more plant-based diet, or are you better suited to a more of a low-carb, high-protein diet? Now, these might be insignificant distinctions to a person who is basically healthy. But strangely enough, generally the sicker you are, the more profound you will see the changes occur if you adopt a more intelligent way of eating. So it's, in many respects, the anti-version of what you're supposed to be selling this time of year, which is, you know, lose 10 pounds in 6 weeks and stuff. You know, the reality is that this book has been out in 20 years. It's still in hardcover. Okay, which is basically a non-occurrence in publishing. I mean, usually the first thing they want to do is get you into a paperback. Here it is still in hardcover. It's in an inordinate number of languages, and I'm not going to pat myself on the shoulder too much, but really what I'm trying to do is indicate that there's a staying power that comes from somebody who's eating some way for 20 years. That's a whole lot different than somebody who's eating that way so they can get into a tuxedo for their brother's wedding. You know, there's a whole different change in mentality that occurs. And most of the time, the people who do it long term are the ones who have irritable bowel and Crohn's disease and thyroid, and you know what I'm saying? There's real indications, and so we just take a step back and go, now how does that work? Well, your gut relates to your immune system. Your immune system relates to your body's healing capacity or non-healing capacity. Your blood type conditions your gut, so looking at your blood type tells us about the gut, which tells us what to eat, which conditions your gut, which improves your immune system, which affects the disease in your body. Pretty straightforward.
I thought it was interesting, too, in addition, obviously, what you eat is important, but different types of exercise depending on your blood type. I thought that was kind of unique. I didn't know much about that.
It sounds crazy, all right? I mean, you know, why don't you exercise to your astrological sign? But the reality of the whole thing is, again, it's science-based. And to understand that, you know, you have to understand that actually when we're talking about what makes a person A or O or B is really a switch that's occurring on a gene, on a chromosome. And it turns out that the gene for ABO is like a master regulator of other genes. Once you get one of those letters, it starts switching other things on and off. Mm-hmm. It turns out that one of the things it likes to switch on and off if you're blood type O is the control of your dopamine, which is a happy chemical. And if you're out of balance in your type O, which is almost 1 out of 2 people, you will convert all your dopamine into a chemical called norepinephrine. And dopamine is happy, and norepinephrine is stress. And so you don't want to do that. You want to keep the dopamine levels high, and the best way to do that is physical exercise. So these are the people, you know, that tell you they get the advantage of that dopamine. So what do? When they exercise, they say, I feel great, I'm relaxed, my mood's better. Okay, now you take me. Unlike my wife, who's type O, who exercises and feels great, I tried to jog several times in my life, and every time I started jogging, I felt terrible afterwards. I mean, you literally would have to peel me off the floor after I did this. And it turns out that I don't get that benefit that she does. I have a different stress chemical that's more amenable to actually things like yoga and Tai Chi. It's a chemical called cortisol, which is a different way of reacting to stress. Now, if I'm a good boy and I do my yoga class or I go to my Tai Chi class or I do my martial arts, I get that stress response. So unlike a lot of exercise recommendations, which are just based on, you know, maybe controlling your weight or building muscle, we're really looking at engineering the exercise to play into these stress patterns. And it's really the same rationale that went into the food things, which is where are the differences and can we engineer a solution? Can we, you know, produce an application that's going to make a difference if a person adopts this way of doing things?
Yeah.
And 20 years later, I wrote a revised book for a book that needed no revision. Nothing fundamental to the values, nothing has changed in 20 years. Although all the other diet books have done pirouettes in terms of, you know, the guy with the low fat eating salmon. You know, I mean, everybody's had to modulate. And I had changed very few things. I only had to add the new data that came in that was showing that blood type was a big influence on your microbiome, which is all your bugs and stuff. So that was really where I wrote a lot of the new part of the book was how, and these bugs, they control everything. They run the world. They control inflammation. They make more neurotransmitters for you in your gut than you make in your brain. I mean, it's this entire world that we always thought these were just kind of benign guys that just were sitting around inside your digestive tract minding their own business. And it turns out that they're pushing all sorts of buttons and throwing all sorts of switches. We never knew about it. And it turns the biggest difference from one person to another in the type of bacteria that they have is their blood type. The blood type is the single biggest influence on the variation between people when it comes to this microbiome. So that's when I had to write the revision, because this was just unavoidable. We had to put this in the book.
Well, it's great information in the book. Again, you lay it out well with the different blood types and foods that you're recommended to eat. Again, it's called Eat Right for Your Type, the Individualized Blood Type Diet Solution. And Dr. Peter J. D'Adamo has been our guest. And, Doctor, give out your website one more time. I'm sure people like to get more information about you in the book.
Sure. I mean, it's a great website in terms of the tools. So it's my last name, so it's www.dadamo.com.
Great. Doctor, pleasure talking to you. Again, congratulations on the success of the book, and hopefully we can talk to you again soon. But thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Doug. Pleasure chatting with you.
I'm Stan Brock. 30 years ago, I formed Remote Area Medical to help people overseas. But then we found generations of families in America isolated by poverty from the health care they need. Together, we can take dental, vision, and medical help to 1 million adults and their kids, right here at home in the United States of America.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles Media.